Welcome back to the DeveLOVED Podcast. I'm Ash, and today we're continuing the conversation from last week about falling apart versus falling together. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to go back because today is all about building on what we started. But even if this is your first time joining, you'll still find something here that speaks to you. So I just want to start by saying I'm recording this podcast a few days late. Today is Thursday, and I usually post my podcast on Tuesdays. So that means I record sometime over the weekend. It didn't work out this weekend. I had a lot going on in my life, and then my daughter got sick. So I had to put this on pause, take care of what I needed to take care of, and now I'm here recording. And I just want to say, I'm mentioning this because old Ashley at one point would have been like, you see, I messed up. I didn't do it on time. I didn't turn it in on time. I should just call it all off. Just stop while I'm ahead, right? But I still have the want to do this. I'm again trying to throw out that it has to be perfectly lined up and done in order for it to be done well. No, it just has to be done. So instead of what I usually do, fall apart, quit, go back to step 1, and probably call myself a few names while I'm at it, I decided to keep myself together and say, well, I handled what I needed to handle. I prioritized my family, my children, and now I'm here. I'm ready to record this episode, and I'm really proud of myself for not giving up and for not claiming failure because I didn't meet a deadline. I still have great intention. I still have a lot of heart into this, and I'm so excited to be recording this, even if it's a little late, but it's getting done, and I hope to get back on track soon. So after episode 3, I was flooded with messages and little notes from so many of you. You shared your own stories and told me kind of a little bit what it looks like on your end and in your life, what it looks like to fall apart. Some of you told me that the episode gave you language for what you've been feeling, but you didn't know how to explain it. Others said it helped you realize you weren't alone in that in-between space where things feel broken, but maybe that brokenness is just actually the beginning of something honest. Reading your words reminded me of why I started this podcast in the first place, to have real conversations that strip away the perfection we're sold and talk about what actually happens in the human mind and heart. And I'll be honest, even after recording the last episode, I sat with it for a while myself. I felt so vulnerable, like I just handed over a messy piece of myself. But what I realized reading your feedback is that sometimes the messy piece is the part that connects us the most. Because when we strip away that polished exterior, we discover that all of us, we are carrying something fragile, something unfinished, something that we've been trying to hold together. Talking about falling apart isn't just an idea for me. It's so real. And I've been in those seasons where it felt like every piece of me was unraveling. I've had moments where I wondered if I'd ever feel steady again. But back then, my falling apart was anything but healthy. I did it in silence. I carried shame. I blamed myself. I would cry until my head throbbed and then slip quietly into my bed like nothing happened. The next morning, I'd wake up with swollen eyes and an aching heart, and I would just tell myself I felt better. But in reality, I only let off a little steam. I wasn't healing. I was just releasing the pressure and then stuffing all the pain right back inside. Today, my falling apart looks different. It's still messy because I am human, but it's a healthier kind of messy. I let myself cry and I vent, but I don't keep it locked in anymore. I talk with someone I trust. My husband, a close friend, my therapist. I write it out in a journal. I create small action steps. I think that's the key. It's just not venting and just letting it all out. It's that next step. It's engaging in that next step. So I create small action steps. I throw out the pieces that no longer serve me, and then I take a hard, honest look at the ones I need to work on. It's still uncomfortable, but now it feels like a movement instead of suffocation, and that's progress. I keep coming back to what many of you have echoed in your own stories. Sometimes the unraveling we go through, it allows us to see what was never woven together tightly to begin with. Sometimes the falling apart shows us what's fragile and what's fake, and what we've been carrying that was never ours to carry. And while that's painful, it's also incredibly freeing. I know at times when certain parts of my life unraveled and I was faced with the truth, I wasn't ready to deal with it. I swept it away, out of sight, and that only caused more damage and prolonged the pain. The feeling of ready was never going to come. I had to start. I had to take it on head first and start the work. So today in part 2 of this conversation, I want to dig a little deeper. I want to expand on some of the why falling apart can feel so unbearable, but also why it's often the exact doorway we need to step through to fall together. I'm also going to share a couple more stories to help us see how this plays out in real life. So in part 1 of this conversation, I shared the idea that falling apart and falling together aren't enemies. They actually go hand in hand. Falling apart isn't proof that you're failing. It's often proof that something isn't sustainable anymore. I said last time that when things unravel, it reveals what's fragile, what's fake, and what we've been carrying that maybe was never ours to hold. And I want to stay there for a moment because that part hit home for a lot of you. Here's why I think it resonates so deeply. Our brains are wired to want stability. We're taught that strength means holding it all together, that success means never breaking, and that if you fall apart, you are doing something wrong. But the truth is, falling apart is part of the process. It's actually a signal that your body, your heart, and your mind can't keep holding things the old way. It's not just you. Our nervous system is programmed to love patterns, even the unhealthy ones. That's why we sometimes hold on to jobs, relationships, or even routines that are hurting us, because unfamiliar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. And that sounds so strange, right? Like, why would anyone choose to stay in pain? But the truth is, our bodies and our minds are wired to cling to what we know. The known, even if it's toxic, feels predictable, and predictable feels safe. So we keep going back to the same arguments. We stay in friendships or relationships that drain us. We keep saying yes when desperately we want to say no. We overwork, overgive, and overfunction because at least those patterns are familiar. And however that foundation of us was formed, whether it was built through toxic relationships or unhealed trauma or just being in survival mode, that kind of foundation won't last. It looks solid on the surface, but underneath it's cracked and fragile. It can hold for a little while, maybe even a few years. But eventually it gives way because anything built on fear, shame, or pretending to be okay will always crumble under the weight of real life. A foundation like that isn't strong, it's borrowed. It's patched together of what other people told us we had to be. And sooner or later, life will force us to face it. It's not to punish us, but it's to give us a chance to rebuild on something real. For me, I realized my foundation was built out of bricks. And those bricks weren't even mine. Pieces from so many different people, their opinions, their expectations, and their criticisms. And those bricks didn't fit together. They were misshaped, unstable, and weak. They never worked in harmony, and yet I kept stacking them, hoping they'd somehow hold me up. But when it all came crashing down, I was the one left standing in the rubble, exhausted from trying to build a life that really wasn't mine. That's when I knew if I wanted something stronger and something real, I had to rebuild it. I needed something solid. So instead of stacking broken bricks, I started pouring a new foundation, one made of truth, authenticity, and who I actually am. Concrete, not fragments. Whole, not borrowed. And yes, it's terrifying to build differently and to start again. To let go of what's familiar, even when it's broken. But the strength that comes from a solid foundation, one that's yours and yours alone, makes every ounce of fear worth it. Freedom, change, healing, those things require us to step into the unknown. And the unknown feels terrifying. That's why so many of us fight falling apart, because it feels like we are losing control. But here's what I want you to hear. Falling apart is not always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. It's preparation for growth, for peace, and for the version of you who can finally breathe without carrying the weight of things that were never meant for you. Think of it like clearing a room. When you finally admit the clutter is overwhelming, you're going to start emptying things out. And yes, it's going to look chaotic in the process. Boxes everywhere, piles all over the floor, dust is being stirred up in the air. But that's the falling apart part. That mess is actually preparation for something new. You can't organize what you haven't unpacked. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe it feels like everything is unraveling. Your emotions, your relationships, your routines, and maybe it feels unbearable. But what if this season isn't about destruction at all? What if it's just the preparation stage? You're clearing out space so you can rebuild something stronger, healthier, and more aligned with who you really are. I don't know about you, but I need a deep pause after hearing all that. Because even though I prepared this all, even though I'm the one saying it, it's still a lot to hear. Because it hits home. It's so true. So let's just take a few moments to let all of that sink in and reflect. I want you to think about your own patterns, the things you keep returning to, even though you know deep down inside they are not healthy. What's that familiar pain in your life? Is it a relationship, a habit, or maybe the way you talk to yourself? What is that one familiar pain you keep returning back to, even though you know it's not healthy? Why do you think you keep holding on to that familiar pain? Is it because it actually serves you? Are you doing it for someone else? Or is it because it just feels safer than the unknown? And then I want you to ask yourself, if I were brave enough to step into unfamiliar freedom, what would that look like? How would my life change? These questions aren't easy. They can feel really uncomfortable. But that discomfort is where truth starts to show up. So if you have a journal near you, I want you to take a few minutes and write this down. And if you don't have one, that's okay. I will put everything in my guided worksheet on my website. What familiar pain are you holding on to? And what might freedom look like even if it feels scary right now. And I want you to remember, you don't have to have all the answers. Sometimes just asking the right questions is the beginning of change. One of the stories I heard after episode 3 that really hit me, I'm going to share right now. She reached out to me on Instagram and then sent me an email with her story. And she wants to remain anonymous, so I'm just going to call her Brittany for the sake of the story. Brittany said she stayed in a relationship for years because walking away felt impossible. The foundation of who she thought she was, her identity, her worth, even her sense of safety, it was all tied to that person. So the thought of losing him felt like she would lose herself. And even though the relationship was toxic, even though it chipped away at her little by little, she told herself, this is just what love looks like. This is who I am. This is where I belong. And this is what I deserve. Brittany said she ignored the cracks for so long. The constant arguments, the silent treatments, and the way she had to ignore her feelings and thoughts to make herself smaller, less important, just to keep the peace. She kept convincing herself that if she tried harder, it would hold it all together. But then came her breaking point. One night, she said it was like her soul couldn't carry it anymore. She described herself packing a bag, and her heart was racing so hard she thought she might pass out. She walked out the door and she sat in her car and she just sobbed. But before I continue the story, I want to stop right there. That's the part where most of us, whatever the pattern we're changing is, this is the part where most of us would say, oh, my body is not responding the right way. This doesn't feel right. Let me stop. That's not what it is. That's just your body, your brain, your nervous system saying, this is unfamiliar. We don't usually do this. So you go into this like defensive survival mode. Her heart was racing so hard, she thought she might pass out. She pushed through that fear and that unfamiliar freedom. That feeling of walking out the door was scary. It was different. But it was the right choice. So I want you to remember that. You feel like your body is not responding the right way. I want you to pause. I want you to think about it. I want you to ask yourself, do I feel this way because this is the wrong thing to do? Or do I feel this way because it's the right thing to do, and it's new, and it's different, and it's scary? So Brittany's story is pretty fresh. This just all happened a few weeks ago. So this moment is still very raw and very painful for her today. She even mentioned that although she is safer and she's already feeling happier, her mind sometimes feels like it's trying to pull her back into her old pattern. She feels like she misses her old life, but she's realizing that she just misses the familiar routine. Brittany is working on building a new foundation, step by step, and she doesn't want to rush it. The person she is becoming is new to her, so she wants to take time to get to know her and honor her life. I spoke to someone about this story, and in the back and forth of it, we really grabbed onto something really beautiful yet heartbreaking. Why are we so scared to meet our authentic selves? Is it because we're afraid of what everyone else would think of them? Is it because they are strangers to us? If we bring them out, we have to change so much in our lives. And that kind of honesty is raw. It's messy, but it also is the beginning of freedom. After going through Brittany's story, I had a few reflection questions pop up. I want you to ask yourself, Is there a place I am staying, not because it's healthy, but because leaving feels too terrifying? It doesn't have to be a physical place either. Maybe an emotional state or a mindful state. Where are you staying just because it feels too scary to leave? What would it look like to admit, even to ourselves, that staying is costing us more than leaving ever would? Do you know who you really are? Is becoming your authentic self scary? The next story I received via email. She also wants to remain anonymous, so for the sake of the story, I will call her Tiffany. Tiffany was someone who thought she was doing everything right. She worked nonstop and she always said yes. She lived by the belief that pushing herself to the edge was the same thing as being strong. She said she wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. But one day, her body gave out. She collapsed at work. Paramedics were called, and she woke up in a hospital bed, disoriented and terrified. She told me, "I thought it was just stress. I thought I could power through like I always did. But lying there with wires on my chest and doctor looking into my eyes saying, 'If you don't slow down, you won't last much longer.' That was the moment. I realized my definition of strength was actually destroying me." She admitted she ignored every single warning sign her body tried to give her for years. The pounding headaches, racing heart, constant fatigue, anxiety that would leave her staring at her ceiling at 2 a.m. She brushed it all off because she thought productivity equaled worth. That health scare was her ultimate falling apart. It stripped away the illusion of control. It also became the turning point. She said, "The night I fell apart in the hospital bed was the night I finally realized I wasn't living. I was performing. I didn't want to perform anymore." From there, she began to rebuild, slowly and imperfectly. But she started saying no. She changed her lifestyle, and she gave herself permission to rest without guilt. For the first time in so many years, Tiffany started to feel like she was actually living and not just existing. Her story made me pause because it made me think of so many of us are carrying silent warning signs and we just learn to ignore them. So I want to ask you, what is your body speaking to you right now? What signs are you brushing off as normal? Do you confuse exhaustion with strength? Were you taught to do that? If your body could talk to you honestly, without silencing it, what would it say? While you reflect on those questions, I also want you to do another thing. I want you to think of or write down one area in your life where you've been pushing past your limits. Then I want you to think of or write one small, practical way you can give yourself rest or relief this week. I want you to think of some immediate action, not just something that you might do in the future, something that sounds like a good idea, but just something right now, something small and practical you can do this week for yourself. Sometimes the unraveling doesn't start in your mind, it starts in your body, and listening to it might be the first step towards falling together. I want to circle back to the heart of what we shared today. We talked about how falling apart isn't proof of failure. It's often proof that something wasn't sustainable to begin with. And when those cracks show up, they aren't punishment, they are preparation. We heard the story of someone who found the courage to leave a relationship that was toxic and suffocating, even though it terrified her. And we heard the story of a woman whose body forced her to stop, to face the truth, and to rebuild her life on something healthier. Each of these stories remind us that falling apart looks different for everyone. Sometimes it's in your career, and sometimes it's in your relationship. Sometimes it's in your body. This also brought to light something very important. We've normalized being broken. We've normalized pushing past our limits and ignoring every sign to slow down. We compare our brokenness to everyone else's because it feels familiar, because it fits the pattern we've always known. But here's the truth. Just because broken is common doesn't mean it's where we're meant to stay. Instead, we can use brokenness as fuel to propel us forward. We can fit in self-care. We can choose love, and we can declare out loud, I am worth it. I deserve better. And sometimes you're not telling that to someone else. You're telling that to yourself. With everything we talked about today, I don't want you to just hear it. I want you to absorb it. Make it part of your pattern, and then share it. Spread this message to someone else who may need the reminder. If you only take one thing away from this episode today, I want it to be this. Breakdowns are normal, but being broken down isn't. Okay, so let's put together everything we heard today. How can one start the work? Let's go through a few takeaways that I want you to incorporate into your journey as you work through it all. Number 1, notice the pattern. Identify one area where you keep repeating the same unhealthy cycle. And I want you to write it down because awareness is the first step. It cannot live in your brain and in your mind. It needs to come out. Number 2, check the foundation. Ask yourself, am I building my life on truth and authenticity or on expectations and survival? Be honest about what needs rebuilding. Number 3, listen to your body. Pay attention to one physical sign: fatigue, headaches, tension, anxiety, and treat it as information, not an inconvenience. Number 4, release one thing. I want you to let go of one thought, habit, or a piece of shame that no longer serves you. Number 5, reach out for support. Choose one safe person, whether it's a friend, a partner, a therapist, family member, and I want you to share what you are carrying. Don't fall apart in silence. Before we close today, I want to invite you into something special that I'm doing this month of October. The 31-day Falling Apart Challenge. Every day, I'm writing down one thing I need to let fall away. Whether it's a habit, a thought pattern, or a piece of shame, or even just an old routine that no longer serves me. I'm writing it on a piece of paper that has a leaf on it, just to kind of fit into the theme. But you can write it on any piece of paper or in a journal. And I'm putting my piece of paper into a jar. It's symbolic, but it's powerful, because each day I'm choosing to let go of one piece of what no longer belongs. And in November, my hope is to have a clear picture of what's left standing, the pieces that are worth keeping, worth rebuilding, reworking, and the pieces I need to let go. I would love for you to join me in this challenge. You don't need fancy supplies, so you can just grab a notebook or any piece of scrap paper, and each day ask yourself what needs to fall away today, and then write it down. If you want, you can share it with me, tag me, message me. Let's walk this journey together, because healing feels a lot less heavy when you know you're not doing it alone. And if you have a week where you don't write it down every day, that's okay, because today I'm going to catch up with a few days, but I'm also holding myself accountable to stay in this challenge. Before I end this, I just want to really wrap up what we talked about today. Where in your life do you need to stop normalizing being broken and start choosing to rebuild? And also, I really want you to think about what I said earlier. Breakdowns are normal, but being broken down isn't. Next week, we're shifting into a powerful theme, cycle breaking. We'll talk about the patterns we inherit, the ones we repeat without even realizing, and how to finally step out of them so we can build something new. If you ever felt trapped in the same cycles, this episode is for you. And it might be a few episodes long. As always, I want to remind you, if today's episode brought up heavy feelings, please don't carry them alone. Reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a neighbor, a loved one, anyone, and give yourself time to process what we talked about today. Don't forget the guided worksheets for this episode and all other episodes are available on my website, DeveLOVEDCo.com. They're there to help you dig deeper, reflect, and put this conversation into practice. And with that, I'll leave you with my usual reminder. You are not alone. You are worthy of love. And growth is always possible. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to the DeveLOVED Podcast, where real growth comes from real conversations.